have ruled the largest of this vehicle class for decades. But in the past few years, they've faced increasing competition from the Germans.
The Germans?
With the introduction of the BMW X7 and this larger and kind of more formidable Mercedes GLS. But are they competitive in this vehicle segment? With prices for mainstream kind of large SUVs like Chevy Suburbans pushing into the $80,000 and $90,000 range when they're fully loaded, these more luxurious offerings have to get well into the $100,000 range to sort of separate themselves from the pack. Such as this example of the GLS, which rings in at $112,000. I'm also not unaware that this is not the best timing for a full-size luxury SUV review, with, gas prices being what they are. So why don't you sit back and live vicariously through me as we take a look at the 2021, yes, this is 2021, it was last year's model, Mercedes GLS 580. What's going on, everyone? Jax here, and today I've got I already told you what I've got. Who wrote this script? I wrote this script. Let's start with the styling, which I would sort of generously call conservative.
These things are actually just guises for power.
No, not like that. Not like an incel who tries to sound smart by just talking fast. I mean, the GLS isn't really taking any risks here. It's honestly not even embracing some of Mercedes' more attractive design cues. It's attractive enough in a GLB that spent too much time at Golden Corral kind of way. But Mercedes makes some beautiful vehicles, and I really think they're playing it pretty safe here. I like the way the GLE looks much better than this. The proportions just work a little bit better. I feel like it almost has some rear hips. Here, it just seems like they went with a really safe design in the large SUV space, and it's very fine. It's fine.
We're fine. We're all fine here.
It's certainly not bad when compared to the competition. And these wheels, they certainly help the GLS's exterior kind of have a little bit more flair. These are a $3,000 option, and in case you're wondering, they are 23-inch wheels wrapped in Pirelli P0 summer rubber. The rears are 325 width, which is just insane. The fronts are 285 width. That's 10 millimeters wider than the 275s on the back of my C5 Corvette. Maybe the most impressive thing about these sort of size and grandeur of these wheels is how little they affect the overall ride quality. We'll talk more about the ride quality in a second. Powering this behemoth is a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, making 483 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque, with an assist from a 48-volt mild hybrid system. So it's getting a little bit of a boost, but don't get too excited just yet. It mainly just allows the GLS to kind of chill in traffic without running the engine so much. It's not contributing a ton to this thing's gas mileage, although it does get up to about 21 miles per gallon on the highway, which isn't terrible for this class of vehicle, especially when you consider the power on tap, because 516 pound-feet is formidable. The 9-speed Shift-O-Magic-tronic, I don't know, Mercedes has to add tronic to everything. Anyway, the 9-speed automatic is practically invisible in its operation. It's nice and smooth, and it sends the power to the ground through Mercedes' 4MATIC all-wheel drive system. Okay, so they also add MATIC to everything that's not tronic. I would love to be sitting in one of their naming meetings. Now, let's talk about how all this comes together from behind the wheel, because in my opinion, it's kind of hit and miss. So here we are behind the wheel of the GLS 580, and it is a very pleasant vehicle to drive with a few catches that I've found during the week. Now, first of all, as you'd expect in a high-powered Mercedes-Benz, power is plentiful in this thing. I mean, you've got 483 horsepower. I mean, you know, better part of 500 horsepower. You have over 500 pound-feet of torque. So this thing is not slow. The 580 has no trouble moving its mass around, okay? We'll put it that way. Steering isn't bad. I've got it in comfort mode right now because I wanted to test it this way for you guys, since this is probably how most people are gonna drive this car. Truck SUV. So I decided to go with comfort mode to kind of make it the most accurate, plus it defaults to comfort mode. So we're gonna go down the handling road in a minute in comfort mode. So everything that I'm talking about, the suspension, which is the standard air suspension, the steering, throttle response, braking, is all in comfort. Now it is worth noting that you can tighten it up by putting it in sport mode. I didn't find it made a meaningful difference that satisfied me, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it does kind of tighten things up a little bit in the suspension. So if you're like me and you kind of hear what I have to say on the handling road, you would probably want to keep this in sort of the dynamic mode most of the time. In comfort mode, the steering is fine. This thing is loaded to the gills with Mercedes sort of safety and radar cruise control, autonomous driving sort of technology, which works really well, I think. And so I found the steering in comfort mode to be okay. It's not too light. It has sort of an unnatural feel at times, I think, when it's doing its steering assist kind of thing. It's definitely not as egregious as it is in some other brands and models, but you do notice it. So it's accurate enough. I don't have any problem with it. This is a giant SUV, so like, what do you expect? Throttle response, brake pedal feel, similarly fine. Brake pedal feel in particular is good. I do feel like the pedal kind of requires a little bit too much travel. It's sort of firm enough, you know, not offensive, but just okay. We're gonna turn onto the handling road though and kind of see one of my main quibbles with this particular vehicle. So here on the handling road, you'll see kind of my main dynamic complaint, and that is that the GLS 580 is an incredibly comfortable SUV that never settles down. Over this first kind of rough patch, there is constant motion. It's taking the edge off. It rights itself, and you don't see as much kind of up and down probably on camera as there is, but it never quite smooths out. Now around the sharp corner there, it is impressively flat. It's almost like creepily flat for such a large SUV. But as we go down this sort of straightaway where you have these kind of like wallowing ups and downs, these bigger kind of little hills and dips and things like that, it's just this constant rocking. It's not as bad as it was on, like, I think it was the Lexus RX that I had, but it just never quite finds itself. It never quite regains composure. That was the big bump. It's good, it's comfortable. There's just a lot of motion for my tastes. I feel like this has all of the makings of an ultra comfortable cruiser. When you're on the highway and like smooth roads, this thing is utterly serene and unperturbed. But on some of these kind of suburban back roads, it just is always doing something. That's kind of my main criticism. It's just always doing something. And It might not bother you all that much, but I just wish it was a little more composed and a little more settled on this sort of broken pavement. It kind of goes from side to side, from corner to corner, and instead of kind of bouncing the car, it seems to rock a lot. And I think that's where my main kind of criticism comes from. It just doesn't ever feel buttoned down because of that rocking motion. The seats are fairly comfortable. Now, I have a little bit of a problem with the Mercedes seats for some reason. I think it's because I have lower back issues, so I wish there was a little bit more lumbar. But I think for most normal people, they are incredibly adjustable, and you'll probably think they're absolutely fine. Butt cushion and backrest comfort is great. They're heated, they're cooled, they massage, they do all the things. So they're pretty fantastic. I think a normal shaped person won't mind. One thing though, why is there no head-up display in a $112,000 SUV? That feels like a bit of an oversight in something this luxurious. And like I said earlier, this thing has all of the driver assistance features, and I didn't get to use them a ton, but they work really well. I generally like this sort of user interface, the ergonomics of the GLS. I found it pretty easy to use. I didn't have any trouble finding my menus and getting things set up the way I wanted it set up. Didn't have trouble activating the radar cruise control. Everything is pretty intuitive if you just take a second to learn it. So it definitely is a plus there. Also, I want to mention the high beams in this car kind of open like a curtain. That's just super cool. You know, what's not super cool is these lame running boards. These running boards are lame, Mercedes. When you're tall, you don't need the help. Have them retract. Electronically come out, have them retract. Lame running boards. It also has all of the driver safety systems in it. So you get all the expected, collision warnings and lane departure warnings and steering assist and the cross traffic alerts and all that. And it does it in the front, and it has the augmented reality navigation, which is kind of a cool party trick. I mean, I like Google Maps, but I had that up when we first got the car, and Mrs. Jax was like, oh, the arrows on the screen, that's kind of cool. Be cooler if it had a head-up display though. And one thing that Hallie really liked, she's actually sad this car goes back tomorrow, is the LED lighting in here. The LED lighting in here is gorgeous. I love the LED lighting. It's such a simple touch to make a car or an SUV seem so much more just premium and elegant. It's like infinitely customizable. You can literally pull up a color wheel and select any color of the rainbow for the LED lights. So that's super cool. Love that. It rings all the cool areas of the car. Really nice touch. On that note, the materials in here are generally fantastic. I like the trim, the metal trim. I like the soft touch plastics, the leather wrapped kind of grab handle things here. The steering wheel feels great. It's chunky without being cartoonish. Hello, BMW. So the general ambiance of this cabin does feel like a $112,000 vehicle, except one thing. And I know Throttle House has mentioned this many times. When you press on some things on the Mercedes, it does creak. I've noticed this in a couple German cars. I don't really understand why that is. My excuse that I make for them is that we've had some pretty wild temperature swings here lately, and materials expand and contract. It still seems a bit odd in a vehicle that costs this much money. It's not a commentary on build quality. It's tight as a drum and nothing squeaks and rattles when you're driving. When you touch things sometimes on the dash, there's some creaking. I don't know, I just wanted to point that out because it is a thing. Oh, ergonomically, one complaint I have is that because the screen is basically vertical for the gauges, tall people, top of the screen gets cut off. Well, so if the handling characteristics aren't perfect, does the interior at least make up for it? Well, yes, it somewhat does, and a lot of that depends on your priorities. It might be enough to sway you. The 12.3-inch driver instrument cluster is bright and crisp and highly customizable, and the 12.3-inch infotainment display is equally excellent, and they span the dash in kind of an unbroken giant vertical screen, which, as I said, a little bit of a problem when you're tall, but it looks really cool. This GLS 580 is equipped with some pretty choice options, such as the warmth and comfort package, which in addition to the heated and cooled seats and heated steering wheel, also adds heated door surfaces, so your armrests on the door and the center console also get warm, and same in the back as well. You don't realize that you need that or you've ever missed having that until the weather in Atlanta drops to an extremely unseasonable 18 degrees in March, and you're going out on a double date with friends to celebrate Mrs. Jax's birthday. It's her 25th birthday. Again. So everyone appreciated that option. Well done, Mercedes. This GLS also has the acoustic comfort package, which adds more sound deadening material to the vehicle, as well as infrared laminate to the glass so that it's really, really quiet in here and you won't get skin cancer, I guess? This GLS has the standard 13, I think it's 13, speaker Burmeister sound system, which is so good I can't really imagine that you'd want to upgrade to the higher quality system. It just says Burmeister surround and it sounds awesome, so I don't know what kind of an audiophile needs to upgrade, but there you go. And it has the expected Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity. Speaking of connectivity, I've heard mixed opinions about Mercedes' MBUX system, which stands for Mercedes-Benz User Experience, because of course it does. Here are my thoughts. I actually found it relatively easy to use with redundant controls for both the trackpad and on the steering wheel. I think the trackpad is generally more intuitive than the trackpads found in Lexus and Acura products. It responds pretty quickly, and more importantly, there are pretty much hard buttons for every single feature you'd want to access quickly and without having to take your eyes off the road, so that's also appreciated. But the Hey Mercedes virtual assistant just sucks. She's too slow to respond and pretty useless for all but the most kind of basic tasks. To her credit, I did ask her to take us to an address at one point, and she did eventually, but for anything else other than that, it's like no point to it. Also, one gripe I have about the camera system is this car has cameras facing in every single direction, and it has a hard button to access them. Maybe, because when you press that hard button, it accesses the auto park assist function. Mercedes, when I press the camera button for the parking cameras, I don't want the freaking auto parking system, I want the cameras, because I'm trying to see something. That's why I press the camera button. And it's pretty big in here, honestly. The GLS has a usable third row, and the second row is roomy enough that I can comfortably sit behind myself, which is sort of my standard test for a family vehicle. There are over 17 cubic feet of space behind the third row, which is not bad, and folding that row down gives you almost 43 cubic feet of space behind the second row, which again is pretty good. Those aren't exactly Tahoe numbers, but they're good enough in this class of vehicle. Folding down all the seats gets you 85 cubic feet of space behind the front row seats, so you can get Macy, Madison, and Morgan those ponies that you've been promising them. So should you buy a GLS 580 over the competition? Well, that's a tough call for me, especially if you're an enthusiast dad who's had a Suburban in the driveway for the past decade. Personally, I'd have to say no, unless your sort of heart is set on some of those more showy options. While the GLS, like many Mercedes, especially at the top of the Mercedes lineup, is a technological feast, this amount of money buys you a lot of vehicle, especially if you get something like a Escalade or a Navigator. Not just a lot of vehicle, like literally a lot of vehicle, because those things are huge. The Escalade ESV, that's the big one, can be literally maxed out for just under this GLS's as-tested price of $112,000. It might be lacking some of the GLS's more, techno wow options, as well as its utterly ridiculous 23-inch wheels and tires, but you are getting, to be perfectly blunt, more vehicle for your money. The Navigator can be had similarly equipped, and the new Grand Wagoneer fully loaded can undercut them as well. If it were up to me, that's probably what I would do. Not to take anything away from this phenomenal SUV, but at a certain point you can't ignore that you are getting literally more for your money with the other options. Guys, thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. I will fully admit that I am a solidly lower middle class teacher, and when it gets to these types of discussions, I have a hard time kind of ignoring the value proposition that these SUVs provide, the sort of mainstream ones. Guys, let me know in the comments what you would do. Please consider liking, please consider subscribing if you'd like to stick around. Share this video with anyone who might find it useful, and until next time, ride safe, drive safe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks and peace. Freaking dirt bikes at the park. Okay, Hawk, okay. And the person on the bike coming around the corner again. Come to the park to ride your motorcycle. Just like a Mack truck driving into the park somewhere. Good Lord. Also, the person in the Toyota Camry in front of me is actively trying to die. Turned in front of a giant pickup truck and turned in front of oncoming traffic. Well done.